For a second year running, and on the second day of Passover, uh, the festival in Israel has begun not with celebration but with sirens. Families gathered for the seder meal, the annual ritual of remembering the escape from slavery in Israel. Families were forced to, mid-ritual, to abandon their tables and flee to bomb shelters. This isn't a metaphor. This isn't historical reenactment. This is the grotesque reality of 2025. The Festival of Freedom arrives with the harrowing knowledge that over 100 Israeli hostages have not been freed. Many are presumed dead. A handful, 24, I think 25, are still believed to be held in the tunnels in Gaza. Empty chairs around countless seder tables. The liturgy that calls Jews to proclaim in every generation, we must see ourselves as if we personally left Egypt, feels hauntingly inverted. It's not freedom that Israel is experiencing, but the terrible reputation and the repetition of bondage, cruelty, and despair. Israel is a nation in mourning and fear, but it's also a state teetering on the edge of moral catastrophe. The current government has not only failed to recover its citizens, but in its ongoing siege of Gaza, it's indulged in a policy that amounts to collective punishment of civilians. And this isn't conjecture, it's the assessment of international humanitarian agencies, of Jewish voices worldwide, and indeed of Israel's own conscience if it listens. The Prime Minister Netanyahu clings to office with a desperate tenacity, for he knows that beyond the premiership lies the possibility of prison. And in the meantime, the machinery of vengeance grinds on, a scorched earth campaign, not only against Hamas, but against the very possibility of Palestinian survival in Gaza. What does it mean to celebrate liberation while enforcing starvation? To celebrate kindness, as Chabad would promote as the mark of the festival, while pursuing this bellicose vendetta. Yes, Israel suffered an appalling attack on October the 7th. But is the response proportional or proportionate? The Passover commands people to remember, but more important, it commands people to empathize. In the Seder meal, it says, "Let all who are hungry come and eat." These aren't idle words. They're a moral imperative, and of course they are paralleled in the Easter message of St. John Chrysostom. This year, Jews around the world must confront a painful question. Is this the people who remember slavery, who remember what it means to be oppressed? And how, therefore, can the same people be silent as the Israeli government perpetuates suffering and imposes a form of slavery? To recall the original Exodus story, when the Israelites celebrated the drowning of the Egyptian army, God rebuked them. "My children are drowning," God says, "and you are singing." And this moment in the Haggadah is not symbolic, it's a theological injunction against gloating over the suffering of others, even enemies. And the Passover marks 2 years now in which Israeli families have begged for the return of loved ones. Yet, in the middle of this rhetoric of total victory, the hostages have become pawns in a larger political game. Military operations have rescued only a handful. Most released, most of the hostages who have been released have been negotiated, not through might, but through diplomacy, through compromise. And the Israeli public, once united in grief, is now fractured by anger. And the support for the Israeli public among the Jewish community, particularly in America, and particularly among younger people, is fractured. Weekly protests, once aimed at judicial reform, now decry a leadership that appears to have no coherent strategy beyond survival, political or otherwise. And as Jewish trauma deepens, Palestinian trauma becomes more apocalyptic. The rubble of Gaza bears silent testimony to a campaign unmoored from proportionality. Each year, people ask at the Seder meal, why is this night different from all other nights? And this year the answers are unbearable. Why do we celebrate freedom while others starve? Why do we speak of liberation while enforcing occupation? Why do we recall our oppression while ennobling the subjugation of other people? Why do we read next year in Jerusalem when Jerusalem itself is the site of violent dispossession? In the face of anti-Semitism, real and rising, many Israeli and diaspora Jews call for unity, but unity cannot mean uniformity. And to question the actions of the Israeli state is not to deny Jewish identity. It's to affirm the moral spine of Jewish tradition. The real danger lies not in criticism, but in silence. This Passover is not like other Passovers. It's a festival of freedom, celebrated under air raid sirens. I have friends who have gone back to Israel for the festival, and I heard from them to say that they were already in the air raid shelters. I find it terribly, terribly sad, against a backdrop of human misery, both Jewish and Palestinian. This should be a time to pray for an end to hunger, a time to pray for the release of hostages, all of them, a time to pray for the leaders to have the courage to seek peace rather than power, to pray that next year in Jerusalem is not a slogan of supremacy, but a vow of shared humanity. Because if this continues, and if Netanyahu continues in his current regime, his current objective, I don't see a future for Israel, the most successful country in the Middle East. This is bringing the country and humanity to its knees, and it's in the hands of a very small group of desperate individuals who have not achieved their objectives and who are determined to cling to power.